Chrono Odyssey's first closed beta test has come to a close, and with it, we saw that the game is in, well, a bit of a rough spot. However, that didn't stop me from having a really great time, and really my main interest with this beta was to test out more of the different classes and the weapons that were going to be available, and just get an idea of what build options we can expect to see when the game does eventually go live. In this video, I wanted to rate the feel and playstyle of each weapon after spending nearly 30 hours testing them in the beta. A few quick notes about this list: I'm looking at each weapon in a vacuum and how it feels to play. I'm not concerned about numbers or what the best build is, since those can easily be adjusted. So with that out of the way, here's how I would rate them. The first thing we're going to be looking at is the Berserker, and we're starting off with the Battle Axe. The Battle Axe was more of a tanky offensive weapon, and it had a couple different playstyles. I actually really enjoyed this weapon. It has a lot of block support. You can apply bleeds, which decreases enemy defenses. It also does a little bit of damage over time, but really it's that defense drop that gets applied. It was very easy to apply these stacks, and also there's a spin to win build that felt okay to play. My favorite thing about this weapon though is actually the it has a parry ability, and it does a ton of damage if you're able to successfully parry. You also get a couple crowd control effects with this weapon, and overall it felt like it was really well balanced between both tanky and offense, and I would rate the Battle Axe as S tier. Next we have the twin axes for Berserker, and these were actually my favorite weapon to play as a Berserker. The reason being the combos that you could do with your skills just felt like they flowed very fluidly. I really enjoyed just the overall fluidity of these weapons. This weapon also has a very strong synergy skill where switching to your twin axe will give you a boost in your rage. So it's really good for rage generation, and that plays a vital part in Berserker in general. So I think that twin axes are going to be extremely strong for any weapon combination for the Berserker. But the other thing about twin axes is these felt like a DPS machine. When you would have your special ability active, this is your Berserk, you would drain some health, but you would get a massive damage output steroid. And while this was active, it just felt like you were just chewing through things. I felt like this weapon does require some healing support to really kind of maximize the Berserk state. But really this weapon I think could possibly be one of the highest DPS weapons in the game. And yeah, I really had a good time with this weapon. And unfortunately I started playing Berserker a little bit later, and I wish I could have had some more time, because I would place the twin axes as my actual favorite weapon to play in this beta. Next up are the chain blades, and initially when I was playing around with this weapon, I felt so squishy. I think the chain blades are the hardest weapon to initially start your Berserker, because most of your abilities actually drain some of your life, and initially I thought that was quite punishing, but you eventually realize that your special ability along with the chain blades is a heal that you consume these stacks that your skills eventually build up. So the playstyle usually ends up being you sacrifice some of your health and then you regain your health with your special ability. It's an interesting cycle. I thought it was fine. I didn't have any issues with it. These chain blades do have an extended melee or basic attack range, which does feel really strong. However, my biggest issue with them, the skills themselves felt, I don't know, a little lacking. I only got this weapon to, I think, mastery 9 or 10. I don't quite remember. But the only skill that I remember really feeling like strong using was on the left side of the tree. I don't remember the name of it, but you have two skills there. One is to pull enemies to you, and then the other one is kind of like this horizontal slash. It does a ton of damage. It feels good to press. And in general, I just felt like some of the skills were lacking, some of the impact, I suppose. This is definitely possibly me just not having put enough time into it, but I just felt like most of the time on this weapon was with me just basic attacking and occasionally throwing out some of these other, that horizontal attack. Yeah, the weapon felt fine. I didn't have any complaints with it. It once you kind of understand the flow for the heal and health consumption, it does flow nicely together. But currently I would just place it in B just because it feels like it's missing some impact in some of its other skills. The next class we're going to be talking about is the Swordsman, starting off with the Greatsword. So for me personally, I really liked the Greatsword. The attacks felt like they have a ton of weight to them, mainly your basic and your special attacks. However, your skills that you can activate are all pretty fluid. You can weave them freely in on your basic attack combos, and everything just felt like it flowed really nicely for a weapon that feels heavy. This weapon also has a few really cool animations, like one of the piercing grabs, I think is what it's called. You actually stab an enemy and you have this throwing animation. It looks really cool, it does a lot of damage, and it makes you invulnerable while you're using it. It's just really strong overall. I think one of the weak spots of this weapon though is the special attack. It feels like it takes too long to charge. While you're holding your special attack button, you will charge up to 3 times, and on the second level you just do a really strong horizontal swing, a vertical swing, and on the third charge level you do a horizontal swing into a vertical swing, and it does a ton of damage. It does so much damage, a lot of stagger. It just feels like it takes way too long to get to that third charge stage. So I wish that the weapon would have a little bit more support with those charge levels. Maybe if you have extra rage or something like that, you can invest in reducing your charge time. I just felt like the weapon was missing a little bit on that front. Otherwise, because of how everything flowed together really well, I would place the Greatsword as an A rank, just under the cusp of S. Next we have the Sword and Shield, and this is the one weapon that I didn't get to play very much of, so I'm gonna place this in didn't play so I can't rate it effectively. The couple of notes that I had taken for this weapon is the counter and parry playstyle does feel really nice to play. However, I just felt like the damage was maybe a little lacking, at least in the early stages of the game. I also noticed that the taunt mechanics seemed broken, so I couldn't really effectively play as a tank, I suppose. So if you enjoy a sword and board playstyle, I think this weapon with investment will end up being really fun to play. It's just that I unfortunately ran out of time, and on the last day of the beta I was trying to get a good feel for it, but it was just unfortunately a little too late. And then for the final weapon on the Swordsman is the dual blades. I started off really not liking dual blades. I felt like they were just a little clunky, I suppose, where it felt like I was just spamming quick attacks and I wasn't really doing a ton of damage, wasn't doing a lot of stagger, wasn't really generating much rage. But as you kind of get some investment going, this weapon starts to feel really fun. One of the early skills that you can acquire is a dash that also generates 20 rage. It felt really strong. It also has an extra support passive where it has a chance to refresh itself on use. So getting things like multiple resets just felt like the dual blades were constantly generating rage and fueling both the dual blade attack combos and also whatever weapon you wanted to combo with it. So essentially dual blades felt like an anchor weapon for the swordsman, where it supported any playstyle you really wanted to go for. It also has a synergy skill where upon switching to the dual blades, you would gain a burst of rage, somewhat similar to that of the twin axes for Berserker. The dual blades also have a bit of a block and parry playstyle. They have a block mechanic that generates a little bit of rage on block, and then they have a parry skill that once used, you kind of do this little dash attack that also feels really strong. And I really liked playing the dual blades towards the end of the beta. So with that being said, I think I would rate the dual blades as an A rank weapon. And then for the final class of the beta, we have the Ranger. This is actually the class that I ended up playing the most of, and I got to the highest level, so I have the most experience with this class, I would say. Starting off with the bow, I really did not like the way this felt to play in the early stages of the game. However, once you kind of get some investment going with it, it actually does a ton of damage, and it has a lot of support skills, and I actually think the bow ended up being pretty solid once you kind of got going. Really, I think it starts to open up more once you get to about mastery, I think it was either 10 or 11, and you kind of get some investment in some of your passives. And the build that I liked to play the most was more of a damage over time build. Burn arrows are extremely strong if you can get those stacked up, but it's pretty easy to actually get them stacked when you have abilities like double tap and curved shot. Also, the build that I ended up playing the most was a swift arrow, or a swift shot build, which is on the right side of the tree. And when you do that swift shot, it actually does increase damage with the more debuffs that you have on a target. And since the playstyle I was building was to apply as many dots and debuffs as possible, it really made the swift shot really strong. And overall, I thought the weapon played pretty nicely. However, because it requires so much investment and the early game feels really rough to play, this is mostly due to the amount of resources you kind of need to manage with the weapon. The aim shots take a ton of stamina to use, and the basic attacks that you'll be doing end up costing a lot of vigor. For some reason in my mind, it should work the other way around. I understand why they end up doing it the way that they have done it, but yeah, just some of the early resource management, it didn't really feel that good. I would really like to see some sort of passive ability that might decrease the amount of stamina cost of your aim shots, or just as a baseline, just reduce the stamina cost, because when you're trying to dodge around and also fire off aim shots, it feels bad. Like, you basically can fire off one aim shot and then dodge once, and then you're out of stamina and you have to wait to recharge. Made some boss fights a little bit more challenging than they needed to be. So that's really my only major feedback. I will also say that Radiant Arrow, which is on the left side of the tree, it doesn't feel that strong to press. It does a little bit more damage than the Swift shot, but the amount of vigor cost for it just didn't feel like it was worthwhile to use. And I guess while we're at it, Radiant Arrow and the Swift shot both feel nearly identical. It's just that the Radiant Arrow has a little bit more range to it, I believe, but they have a very similar animation, very similar play styles and purpose, I would say. It just, yeah, I don't know. Something about those two like spammable skills felt too samey, I guess. And then the other thing, and this is more of a ranged combat issue, so you're also going to see this when I talk about crossbows, but I don't like how there's no drop off for your weapons. You either do full damage or you just do no damage whatsoever if an enemy is out of range. I wish there was a little bit of a middle ground to let us know that we're going to be out of range, especially when you're going to fire off an aim shot. It really sucks to have to use one of your resources and you just do no damage whatsoever. So overall, because of the amount of investment and some of the tweaks that I would like to see with this weapon, I currently would place it in B rank under the chain blades. Next up, we have the Rapier, which is the melee option for the Ranger. I know a lot of people seem pretty torn on this weapon. I personally really liked the way the Rapier felt to play. So a couple of the notes that I have for the Rapiers is both build options. There's like 3 or 4 build options you can go for. All of them felt pretty nice to play. In addition though, the Rapier also has an insanely strong synergy passive. When you swap to the Rapier, you get, I think, a like 15 or 20% critical strike or crit rate buff, and also a 50% crit damage buff for like 15 seconds. And you can also swap to other weapons and this buff will persist. And I think it had an internal cooldown of 30 seconds. So basically you can have like 50% uptime on a buff like this, and it just is incredibly strong. I would not be surprised if that synergy skill got nerfed. So similar to that of dual blades and twin axes, in my opinion, The Rapier felt almost like the anchor weapon for the Ranger, where you're gonna most likely be running the Rapier, even if it's just as a secondary weapon. But the Synergy passive isn't the only damage buff that this weapon gives you. As one of your final skills, you have the Blade Song skill, which is a minute cooldown that applies a massive attack damage boost to you and your party. It also persists through weapon swaps, but with investment, it also cleanses any debuff that's applied to your party. So currently, I think Blade Song sounds like the strongest ability in the game, especially from a party perspective. So this being available to the Rapier, I think instantly bumps its utility up to like an 11 out of 10. A couple systemic issues that I have with the Rapier though, is that a couple of the animations, they look like they're short animations, but you're actually locked in them for what felt like a lot longer than was intended. A couple of these are Crescent Slash and Charging Thrust. It took too long before you could actually dodge, even though it felt like you were moving around and stuff. So I don't know if there was just some input lag or something like that after you're using those skills, but it just felt clunky. I don't really know how to describe it otherwise, and it was a little frustrating. And because of that, honestly, I would put the Rapier as the highest A rank, just under S tier. And then for the final weapon, we have the Crossbow. So similar to what I was saying with the bow, range is a bit of an issue where there's just no drop off. So attacking when you're out of range just does 0 damage, and the crossbow has a shorter range than the bow, so issues like that came up kind of often. In the early stages of the game, the crossbow also feels quite bad to play in my opinion. I felt like I spent most of my time just using basic attacks, and the skills, most of them felt pretty similar. Precise Shot, Venom Shot, Spider Poison, and your basic attacks all felt like they were just doing the exact same animation. Some of the highlights of the weapon though were Butterfly Dance. This attack option felt really cool to use. It's kind of what I envision more of the crossbow to be, where you kind of rapid fire a bunch of shots, and it was the best button in my opinion to press. But once you get enough investment in the crossbow, I can see this weapon being incredibly fun to play. This weapon has a lot of evasive investment. So for example, on the right side of the tree, there's a passive that you can get on your Venom Shot where it gives you a free dodge. And you also have Trick Shot, which basically moves you in a direction that you're moving, and it does damage while you're moving. So basically you're constantly on the run with this weapon. It plays very much into that of a hit and run play style. However, because of just the overall lack of an early game impressions and how the skills feel to play, it felt like you were just doing an auto attack simulator, and I was not a fan of that playstyle. So unfortunately, this is the one weapon that I'm putting in the C rank. Again, I think it just needs a lot of investment to really feel worthwhile to play. In the early stages of the game, it felt like you're just investing points into your basic attacks, and that's where the majority of your damage was coming from. And to me, that's not the most fun playstyle to enjoy in an MMO. But this is going to be the final rankings for my tier list. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, because I'm sure you all have plenty of opinions and disagreements with what I've ranked here. It sounded like most people had a favorite weapon of theirs in this beta. So in my opinion, I think that's a great sign for balance, because everyone is finding something that they personally enjoy. So I think once we see the closed beta test 2 and some of the other classes, it's going to be pretty interesting to see. I think some of these weapons will also change depending on some of the optimization on the systems themselves, such as Rapier, maybe Greatsword and stuff like that. So overall, yeah, I was really happy with this test, and I had a ton of enjoyment. I can't wait to test out the other 3 classes to see how those weapons feel. I will definitely remake this tier list at that point in time. So yeah, for now, thanks for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe for more Chrono Odyssey content in the near future. And thanks for watching. I'm GooberTroy. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.